There is a disturbing truth you have been avoiding. You are not imagining their behavior. You are underestimating how intense and unstable their emotions are becoming. Because what looks like interest and what feels like attention is not as simple as you think. What you keep brushing off as confusion is something much more unstable underneath. They are losing control. And the most unsettling part is that this is happening quietly beneath the surface, in a place even they cannot fully see. But you can feel it. You can notice the shift in their tone, the way their eyes linger just a second too long, the sudden pullback after moments of intensity. That contradiction is not random. It is not harmless. It feels like a kind of internal struggle, like a silent pressure building inside them between what they want and what they are afraid to admit. People do not struggle like this unless something inside them has already crossed a line. And this is where it becomes dangerous. Because once emotion passes a certain threshold, logic does not guide it anymore. It stops negotiating. It collapses under pressure. At that point, you are not dealing with someone calmly figuring out feelings. You are dealing with someone whose subconscious has already made a decision, while their conscious mind is trying to regain control and act normal. Most people misunderstand this. They think mixed signals mean uncertainty. But real uncertainty does not create this kind of tension. It does not create that heavy feeling you sense when they are close. It does not cause someone to almost say something and then stop, like the words would expose too much. That is not uncertainty. That is repression. And repression is never quiet. It builds pressure. It distorts behavior. It leaks out in ways they do not even understand. You may have noticed how they sometimes become distant, almost cold, and then suddenly, without warning, become intensely present again. That is not simple mood change. That is emotional instability created by suppression. It is a mind trying to hold something down while being pulled deeper into it at the same time. And here is the part that creates discomfort. They are not just feeling something for you. They are feeling something they believe they should not feel. That is what is breaking them internally. When desire conflicts with identity, when attraction clashes with self-image, the mind does not solve it peacefully. It fractures. Those fractures show in small ways. They may challenge you without reason. They may test your reactions. They may create distance just to see what you will do. Not because they are playing games, but because they are trying to regain control over something that feels like it is slipping away. And the more they try to control it, the more intense it becomes. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They change form. They turn into obsession disguised as curiosity. They turn into jealousy disguised as indifference. They turn into longing disguised as irritation. If you watch closely, you can see it in moments where they think you are not paying attention. A slight hesitation before speaking. A flicker of emotion that disappears too quickly. A silence that feels heavy. That is not weakness. That is containment. They are holding something back that feels heavy and consuming, and the longer a powerful emotional truth is suppressed, the more unpredictable behavior becomes. They start acting in ways that do not even make sense to them. They push you away and then feel the absence strongly. They ignore you and then become fixated on your response. They create space and then feel uneasy when that space actually exists. This is not true indifference. Real indifference is calm and steady. It does not fluctuate like this. What you are seeing is intensity trying to pretend it is control and failing. Because deep down, control has already slipped. It just has not been admitted yet. That is why every interaction feels loaded. Every silence feels meaningful. Every word feels like it carries something unspoken underneath it. There is something they are not saying, something they are actively resisting saying, and the effort of holding it back is starting to show. It feels like pressure under the surface, like something trying to break through but not finding the right moment. And when that moment comes, it will not be subtle. Suppressed emotions rarely come out gently. They come out all at once. But this raises a question that is rarely faced. If they are already losing control over what they feel, what happens when they stop resisting it completely? There is something more unsettling than someone simply developing feelings. It is watching them struggle against those feelings as if it is a kind of survival response. Because at that point, it is no longer simple attraction. It becomes resistance. And resistance only exists when something feels significant enough to threaten stability. People do not resist what they do not care about. They resist what has the power to change them. And that is what is happening here. Not intentionally, not dramatically, but deeply. Something about you has created a shift that cannot be reversed easily. That is why they pull back. Somewhere inside them, there is a quiet realization forming. You are not just another option in their life. You are a disruption to their internal structure. And disruption does not only affect emotion, it affects identity. It affects how they see themselves, what they think they want, and how they believe they are supposed to behave. At first, they try to rationalize it. They try to reduce it into something small and manageable. They tell themselves it is temporary or not important. But it does not work, because every interaction reinforces something they cannot categorize or explain. It keeps reaching deeper than logic. This is where the mind starts doing something interesting. It begins revealing what has been buried. Old feelings, ignored desires, emotional needs that were never fully acknowledged begin to resurface. You are not creating them, you are exposing them. And that is what makes it uncomfortable for them. Because now they are not only dealing with you, they are also dealing with parts of themselves they thought were gone or controlled. That is why behavior becomes contradictory. One moment, they are fully present, open, and emotionally exposed. The next moment, they retreat completely. It is not because feelings disappeared, it is because fear caught up. Fear of what this means, fear of how deep it goes, fear of losing control over identity. You are not just triggering attraction, you are triggering transformation. And transformation feels like loss before it feels like growth. So the mind resists. But resistance creates tension, and tension always seeks release. That is why the behavior feels inconsistent. Two forces are active at the same time: desire pulling closer, fear pushing away. Neither force is weak. That is why everything feels like a conflict. It is not indecision. It is internal pressure. And if they were to admit how strong this is, they would have to admit something even more uncomfortable. That you matter in a way they did not expect and may not know how to handle. And once that realization forms fully, it cannot be erased easily. The mind can deny it temporarily, distract itself, or avoid it, but it does not disappear. It returns in moments, in pauses, in silence, in the way they look at you when they think you are not noticing, in the hesitation before responding, in the tension that appears when things become too direct. The stronger the suppression, the stronger the eventual release. The mind can only hold pressure for so long before something gives way. And when it does not come out neatly. It comes out unfiltered and uncontrolled. That is what creates the real fear underneath it all. Not just the possibility of feelings being revealed, but the possibility of losing control of who they thought they were in the process. Because if they allow this to fully unfold, they will not remain the same person they were before it started. And that is the true conflict. Not whether something is felt, but whether they are willing to change because of it. Right now they are standing at that edge, trying to act like they are not. But their behavior already shows the truth. Control is slipping, and when control slips, truth becomes harder to hide. The tension you feel around them is not accidental. It is the result of an internal struggle between identity and emotion, between who they believe they are and what they actually feel when you are present. Most people do not recognize this kind of conflict. They mistake it for confusion or inconsistency. But it is deeper than that. It is a silent psychological battle where every interaction becomes a pressure point, and the longer it continues, the more cracks begin to appear. Those cracks show in small moments. A pause that lasts too long, a look that lingers, a sentence that almost gets said but stops halfway. These are signs of something trying to break through internal restraint. And nothing under constant pressure stays contained forever. The question is not whether something is happening. The question is how long it can stay contained before it inevitably changes form and becomes impossible to ignore. Their eyes move quickly when something innocent is said. There is a small change in their tone, a slight shake that almost gives away what they are feeling. It is not simple hesitation or awkwardness. It is something deeper, something coming from beneath awareness. It is the mind pushing through what has been held back for too long. Repression does not behave like reason. It does not wait, it does not plan, and it does not care about timing. It breaks through in pieces, in small moments that look random on the surface, but are shaped by internal conflict. These moments are not accidents. They are signs of something building up inside. This is not only about attraction, it is about inner confrontation. A person is meeting a part of themselves they have tried to ignore for a long time. A part that wants closeness, intensity, and emotional honesty, but at the same time feels afraid of it in a deep, instinctive way. When this conflict grows, behavior becomes less predictable. A person may act without thinking, send messages they later regret, or move closer and then suddenly pull away. They create distance and then try to close it again. It may look inconsistent, but it comes from an internal split rather than carelessness. One part of them is drawn strongly toward connection. The other part is afraid of what that connection might mean. These two sides work against each other at the same time, creating confusion in their actions and reactions. What is often not understood is that the parts of a person they try to hide from themselves can end up influencing their behavior more than the parts they are aware of. They believe they are in control, but when desire and identity are in conflict, control becomes fragile. Identity shapes how someone sees reality. It decides what feels acceptable and what must be pushed away. When strong feelings break through this structure, perception becomes unstable. The person may start seeing things differently without understanding why. Ordinary interactions can begin to feel intense or emotionally charged. At the same time, they try to stay composed. Composure feels like safety. It becomes the last layer between what they show to the world and what is happening inside them. But this layer is not strong forever. Over time, it starts to break. When it cracks, hidden thoughts and feelings begin to show through. A person may say the wrong thing, misunderstand intentions, or react in ways that do not match their usual behavior. These moments are not random. They come from pressure building beneath the surface. There is often fear connected to this. Not fear of the other person, but fear of what it would mean to fully accept these feelings. It challenges how they see themselves. It raises uncertainty about who they are becoming. If they give in to what they feel, they may not be able to return to how they were before. That thought alone creates resistance. It makes every interaction feel heavier. Small moments start to feel significant. Silence starts to feel meaningful. Even simple eye contact can feel loaded with emotion. The internal pressure keeps increasing. Every suppressed feeling, every unspoken thought, every ignored desire continues to build. Over time, it becomes harder to contain. Eventually, these feelings do not stay hidden. When they surface, they do so strongly. They can change how a person sees themselves and how they see the situation. It can feel like everything they believed about their control is being challenged at once. The other person in this dynamic often becomes a trigger for this inner change. Not because they are doing something intentional, but because they reflect back emotions that were already present. They act like a mirror, showing parts of the self that were previously denied or ignored. This reflection can be uncomfortable. It can bring up feelings of longing, fear, curiosity, and vulnerability at the same time. When these emotions are ignored for too long, they do not disappear. Instead, they become stronger and more insistent. Signs begin to appear more clearly. A pause before speaking, a change in voice, difficulty holding eye contact, moments where emotion slips through even when the person is trying to hide it. These are not signs of confusion alone. They are signs of internal pressure breaking through control. Attempts to regain calm often do not last. Rational explanations are used to push feelings away, but they only work for a short time. When emotions are strong enough, they return again and again. This creates a cycle where control is repeatedly challenged. The mind tries to hold everything in place, but the emotional pressure keeps increasing. Over time, this push and pull becomes difficult to sustain. At a certain point, the tension reaches a limit. The mind cannot hold opposite forces forever without strain. Desire and fear cannot both remain strong without something eventually giving way. When that limit is reached, behavior begins to change more clearly. The mask of control weakens. What was hidden starts to become visible. The person may still try to hold on, but the effort becomes harder to maintain. It is not that someone is forcing this change. It is that the internal world can no longer hold the weight of what is being suppressed. The pressure comes from within, not from outside influence. As closeness increases, emotional defenses weaken further. Pretending becomes harder. The difference between what is felt and what is shown begins to disappear. At this stage, the situation stops being about simple choice. It becomes about inevitability. The internal conflict has already progressed too far. What was once denied starts to take control. Repressed emotions do not remain silent forever. They build, they grow, and eventually they demand expression. When this happens, everything can come forward at once. Desire, fear, confusion, and intensity all surface together. When that point is reached, resistance becomes extremely difficult. The person can no longer fully hide what they feel. Emotional truth begins to override controlled behavior. The idea of returning to how things were before becomes unrealistic. Something has already shifted internally. Once that shift happens, it cannot simply be undone by logic or time. As this continues, every interaction becomes emotionally weighted. Every silence feels meaningful. Every word carries more than its surface meaning. The mind begins to read significance into almost everything. The pressure created by holding in emotion eventually breaks through. These breaks are not gentle. They reveal what was already present underneath. They show what was being held back. At this point, it becomes clear that the struggle is not between two people, but within one person's internal world. The conflict is between what they feel and what they believe they should feel. As these inner barriers weaken, emotional expression becomes more direct. What was once hidden begins to appear more openly, even if unintentionally. The effort to stay controlled loses strength. Eventually, what remains is raw emotion without filtering. Fear, attraction, confusion, and vulnerability all exist at the same time without being separated or controlled. When this happens, the person is no longer the same in the way they were before. The internal structure they relied on to stay composed has changed. Something has shifted permanently in how they experience emotion. What they see in the other person also changes. It becomes more than surface interaction. It becomes a reflection of something deeper within themselves that they can no longer fully ignore. The mind may try to continue rationalizing, but emotional truth becomes stronger than reasoning. It pushes through explanation and reaches awareness directly. At this stage, what was once hidden is no longer contained. It is visible in behavior, tone, expression, and reaction. Even when nothing is said, something is communicated. The internal conflict eventually reaches resolution not through control, but through collapse of control. The pressure becomes too strong to maintain separation between feeling and expression. When that moment arrives, there is no return to the previous state. The emotional system has already reorganized itself around what has been revealed. What was denied has already taken shape in awareness. In the end, what remains is full emotional exposure. Nothing is fully hidden anymore. The layers of control have been stripped away by continuous internal pressure. At that point, both people in the situation may notice a clear change. The emotional distance is no longer the same. Something fundamental has shifted in how they relate and respond to each other. This change does not feel small or temporary. It feels permanent because it comes from within, not from outside events. It is the result of internal conflict reaching its limit and resolving through exposure. Once this happens, everything is seen differently. The connection, the emotions, and even the sense of self are no longer exactly what they were before.